Hello, everyone. Our topic that we did was targeted muscle reinnervation. To demonstrate a little bit of what that is, we have Amanda Kitts here. And Amanda Kitts was in an accident where she got hit by a semi truck and she lost her left arm. And as you can see, she's able to perform basic functions of an arm, being able to supinate, pronate, and be able to use her hand and be able to squeeze her fingers down. It's kind of cool just that she's able to do all this thanks to TMR. Next, we have the types of prosthetics that are available on the market. So first, we have passive prosthetics. And what passive prosthetics are, they're just prosthetics that are made to look like the real thing. They don't have any function. They don't have any purpose other than to be aesthetic replacements, just to be there to mimic the real thing. Next, we have body powered movement prosthetics. And what those are is they're harnesses that people will wear and they have buttons on them. And people are able to use their chin or different limbs to be able to access these buttons and to be able to control hydraulic little cables that pull on the little claw hand that it allows it to squeeze or open and to grab things for most part. And then we have myoelectrics. And what myoelectrics are is they go onto your arm or your little amputated spot, and they can receive the impulses that your brain is conducting to the nerves, and they will be able to conduct these impulses from the brain into motions into the hands. And then we have hybrid prosthetics, and those are a mixture of the body powered movements and the myoelectric prosthetics, and they are just kind of trying to get the best of both worlds, but they don't really excel in one category or another. And then we have specific activity prosthetics. And what those are is they are made for specific activities. You have a prosthetic that you can use to brush your teeth, to brush your hair, to go fishing, to go swimming, to go running. And they're just made for those activities specifically. And in our experiment, we had Jesse Sullivan. Jesse Sullivan is a 56-year-old man, and he is a retired lineman. He actually grabbed a couple really high voltage wires and lost his arms in the process. And he had body movement prosthetics, and we did TMR surgery on him to perform some experiments.
So this is a cross section of a nerve. It's just a small cross section, but you can see there's maybe a few hundred individual neurons. In an actual nerve, you'd see hundreds of thousands of individual neurons. And every individual neuron has its own electrical potential when the brain is telling it to do something. So that means we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of electrical potentials. And just due to the sheer quantity, there's not a lot that we can do with that. We can't really input it into any kind of algorithm and make any kind of output that's useful from it. Something that is useful though is the electricity that comes from muscles when they contract. Every muscle, when it contracts, has its own myoelectrical signal, and that signal is something that we can record. It's something that we can use, and we can make outputs from it. And so, if you look at the nerves that run down the arm, when somebody loses their arm, we sever those long 4 nerves that run down the arm, and so we have all these individual nerve endings or neuron endings that don't really do anything. So the idea of TMR is based on putting those four nerves and implanting them into the pectoralis major muscle and severing the nerve that normally ran to the pectoralis major muscle. Those nerves will grow, and the individual neurons will spread out and be able to innervate the muscle. In the beginning, we'll see a little bit of myoelectric activity, and a little bit later on, we'll see full-on muscle contractions in different areas of the muscle when the individual is trying to use those nerves that normally would have run down the arm. And then we just hook up electrodes to the muscles, and we're able to record the electricity from them, and we're able to get robotic outputs from it.
Okay. And in our experiments, our goal was to compare a hybrid myoelectric body-powered prosthetic to a 6 degree of freedom fully myoelectric prosthetic. The 3 degree of freedom hybrid prosthetic, it was only controlled by 2 myoelectric sites on his pectoralis. So he had to toggle with his chin switch between the wrist flexion, extension, supination, pronation, and the elbow flexion and extension. And so the use of it was really tedious and difficult to do. So what happened is 2 years after the initial TMR surgery, we performed another surgery to fit him with this 6 degree of freedom prosthetic. Here's a CGI image pre-surgery. We took this opportunity while we were doing the TMR surgery to remove some split thickness grafts to clean it up and make it a better site to host the prosthetic. We severed the nerves that went to his left pectoralis major, and so we could use that as a recipient for the brachial plexus nerves. While we were doing this, we hoped that the median nerve would create 4 new binding sites, but the median nerve actually created 2 additional to the 4 that we expected, giving us 6 binding sites. And here's a picture of our subject post-surgery. As you can see, we cleaned it up, removing those thickness grafts, and made it a better place. Here in this chart, we can see the different locations that we inputted the nerves on the left column. In the middle column is how the prosthetic is going to receive information from them. The majority of it being the myoelectric signals, that's EMG. On the far right column, we see the different control functions of the arm, and this is where we get our 6 degrees of freedom. So degree of freedom is just motion in one plane of movement. So the first degree of freedom is the hand opening and closing. Our second degree of freedom is elbow flexion and elbow extension. Our third is internal and external humeral rotation. Our fourth is wrist flexion and extension. Our fifth is wrist pronation and supination. And our sixth is shoulder flexion and extension. Here in this picture, we can see with our prototype prosthesis that we had put different IR sensors around it on key places so we could monitor the 3-dimensional joint motion to give us some tangible data instead of just that it looked like it moved. One of the issues that we did run into is that it is a prototype prosthetic, and so we weren't allowed to let our patient use it in his home. So all of our data was gathered over a 2-year period, over 5 to 6 visits, and those totaled to be a bit less than 100 hours that our patient had with the device. The 4 different tasks that we had him do to measure that. The first was object retrieval. We set up 15 1-foot cubes and stacked them in the conformation shown in the image. To start, we had the subject retrieve a cube from each cube that he could reach just to establish his range of motion. After that, we timed how long it took him to grab an object from a cube, place it on the table in front of him, and push a buzzer. Our second experiment was cup stacking. The cups started in an inverted stack, just kind of how they would come out of the package. We timed the patient's ability to unstack the cups and put them in the pyramid shape, and how long it took our patient to undo the pyramid and put them back in the inverted stack. Our third test is the box and block test. This test consists of moving 1-inch cubes from the box on the left to the box on his right. This test traditionally is done in 60-second intervals, but to accommodate the use of the prosthetic arm, we expanded that to 120 seconds. The fourth test was the clothespin relocation. These clothespins are actually Roland graded pinch exercisers, which are just used in physical therapy to assess fine motor skills. What we had him do was move the clothespins from a horizontal bar at the bottom to the vertical bar in front of him. And the fourth test, the fifth, was we had him draw a circle, and that was to test his fine motor skills, his elbow control, and wrist control, all in one test.
All right, so here we have 4 graphs explaining his elbow extension and flexion and his ability to open or have his hand closed. So in the graph A that you see there, we have the elbow flexion and hand opening. So it's starting up here, starting down here, and it's trying to keep his hand open. So as he's flexing his arm, and he has kind of some trouble as he's trying to keep his hand open. Test B was the task of extending his elbow while keeping his hand closed, which was a little bit better. C was the elbow flexion again with his hand closed, which was our best test. And then the last one was elbow extension with his hand open. So now we have the elbow extension and flexion and shoulder flexion and extension as he's reaching for something. So most prosthetics only have 90-degree or 0-degree movement. And with our 6 degrees of freedom, he's able to reach up and grab something and bring it down. This is the bringing down, the retracting portion. It's a little bit worse than reaching for an object, but he's also able to do that. And then here in our last data set, we have the results for those 5 tests. As you can see, for most of the tests, the 6 motor prosthesis was successful in doing it better, but there were some tests where the 3 motor prosthesis was able to get a better time. We suspect this is because of familiarity with the 3 motor prosthesis, or just the experiment itself with the patient that we used.
And so why do we think TMR is important? So we looked up some other data to see what other people were doing to understand where we're at in general in this realm of TMR. And so we looked up a study that's called Multiple Degrees of Freedom Wrist Prosthesis by J.R. Binda. And it was in 2018. This is kind of what they found. They took surveys of people who are using these prosthetics and seeing what they think about them, how well they're able to perform with this one, and just comparing it to see where we're at. And in this graph here, we can see that there's broad body powered and biometronics, and that's just talking about myoelectrics, and that's how they called it. But this is just talking about how these people were able to perform these specific functions on the left, being able to supinate and pronate and be able to flex and extend, and how confident or how well they were able to do these specific functions. And as we can see that the myoelectrics over here, they had a little more success and felt a little more comfortable performing certain actions with the myoelectric. But there were some actions like being able to hold a cup where they felt more comfortable with the body powered prosthetics, just because the claw hand is able to hold it just a little more well than just the myoelectrics, just preference probably. But for the most part, most people feel like they're better with the myoelectrics. And here we have the times that people would wear these prosthetics throughout the day. And for the most part, people are wearing these prosthetics to 8 or more hours during the day, and we want these things to function. And they probably expect a lot out of these, and they want to be able to live their normal life and be able to do what they can or they couldn't do before without these prosthetics. But there's still some problems that we are running into. There's some people that are saying that the function of the myoelectric are still not performing to what they'd expect them to, or be able to do what they're telling it to. And that's kind of where we're at. We're still striving. We're kind of still learning more about this. We're trying to be able to make it so that these people are able to live a functional, satisfactory life. And that's the ultimate goal of our experiments. We want these people to be able to live life like they did before, and we want them to be able to function. But there's still some limitations that we're encountering. And there's still some research that we want to do. There's still some studies that we want to perform to be able to increase the degrees of freedom and have the functions still there. And for it to be comfortable for these people, there's a lot of pain associated with amputations. And we feel that TMR has improved some of those pains, and we are continuing to improve and progress. And that's where we're at, and we're just trying to do our best to help these people. And the ultimate goal is for them to have a happy life and to be able to live as if they didn't have any limitations in their life.